Good evening, my friends. Have you returned to hear another story? Well, then come on in. Settle in now. Take a drink, grab a bite to eat, and then settle in under your blanket or by the fire. For tonight, I have quite the story to tell. Now are you ready? Good. Then let us begin. The last few videos, I've told you all about some of the unexplained events that occurred in my mother's house, both personal accounts from a native to the area and those from someone who was not. There are many more strange things that happened in that house, but for now, let's move on to the owner of the farm, Papaw. For those of you unfamiliar with the term, Papaw is a fairly common word used in place of grandfather back where I was raised. It's basically a southern version of the words Grams, Grandpee, Pappy, or, if you're feeling particularly old-fashioned, Grandpapa. Anyway, my papa owned the farm we lived on. The portion of it I lived on for a good chunk of my life he inherited from his own father, and it had been passed down for a few generations before him. Like his ancestors, Papa has always felt strong ties to the earth, and has viewed his farm as less of a job and more an extension of himself. His head is also about as hard as the rocks in that earth. What I mean by that is he is possibly the most stubborn individual that I have ever met in my entire life. Say for one. Once an idea gets into this man's head, he will not let it go even to save his own life. I am convinced that if he had the choice between having to give up on an idea or having his leg cut off, he'd at least give that saw some heavy consideration. That being said, his stubbornness has also led him to be of a particular mindset that quite a few older men I know back there have. They accept the paranormal for what it is, but are often too stubborn to think that it could happen to them. This has a tendency to lead to bragging of, "I'm not afraid of any ghost," and so on. Which leads us to tonight's story. When my papa was a good deal younger, just fresh into adulthood himself, he had a bunch of friends just like him. His two best buds at the time were Hugh and Dewey. Sadly, the fates did not align for my papaw's name to be Louie, because that would have been amazing for two reasons. Being able to make a DuckTales joke, and also a Rugrats joke, for having a Grandpa Lou. Cartoon references aside, these guys loved a good ghost story. They just never planned on being the characters in one. One day, all three of them, Papaw, Hugh, and Dewey, and my papaw's father, my great-grandfather, had been working on some leased farmland way out in the back country. They particularly enjoyed the perk of having a river nearby that had some very fruitful fishing spots. So, after working with the cattle most of the day, the four of them gathered their cane poles and bait and headed on down to the shoreline. For a few hours, they didn't catch much. A fish here, a fish there. But right as they were about to head out, they started popping those fish like crazy, including some rather large ones. They saw all of these fish headed into shore and knew that something big was chasing them in. Eventually, that something big turned out to be a sizable turtle. I understand that not everybody is fond of turtle meat, but this guy would have made soup enough to feed a whole family. So after a bit of finagling with a net, they managed to pull the turtle in too. The only problem with that was they didn't really have anything to put him in. That was when my great-grandfather got what seemed like a brilliant idea at the time. "Let's go grab something from Shiner Joe's shack." Now, for those of you that have never been to a small town in a rural area, you would be surprised how long their residents' memories might be. Instead of road signs, most drive by using landmarks, which often includes ones that are no longer standing. If you're looking for a specific house, so-and-so might tell you, "Go on down the road there a little piece, and turn right next to where Bud's snack shop used to be. Then go up the hill till you get to where Old Man Miller's house was before it burned down." It doesn't matter that both the store and that guy's house were gone about 10 or 20 years before the fellow giving you directions was even born. They know where anything and everything used to be because those surroundings get passed down in a family. Some place that hadn't been on the map in 50 years might still get called Doug Johnson's place. That's because everything back there, everyone's lives, is centered around stories. And if the place just happened to have a scandalous past, it stuck around in memories a lot longer. And Shiner Joe's shack was one of those places. For those of you unfamiliar with American history, Prohibition was an amendment to our Constitution that made the creation and selling of alcohol illegal between 1920 and 1933. You can imagine how well that worked. It was during the latter part of this era that Shiner Joe came into play. You see, the area that I came from has always been a bit on the impoverished side. During hard times, mountain folks often would take to side businesses to get by. For some, that might be selling extra eggs from their chickens. For others, they find themselves drawn to the more unlawful sort of dealings. Shiner Joe was no exception. Back in those woodlands, it was very easy to conceal a moonshine steal from revenuers. Those were early versions of federal agents who were specifically tasked with taking down illegal booze operations. In fact, quite a few people made some money outside the reach of Uncle Sam by distilling and transporting illegal liquor. Though a lot of church-going folks refused to get themselves mixed up in what the more religious ones termed the devil's drink, it was one of the few lucrative jobs during the onset of the Great Depression. For those who had families that needed feeding, risking their own freedom and lives by breaking the law was the only thing that put food on the table. Whether Shiner Joe was distilling for this reason, or merely to help himself get ahead in this world, I never learned. What I do know is the law finally caught up with him. The details given to my papa were fuzzy at best, but considering how far back in the woodland where the shack was, it was very likely someone had tipped law enforcement off. Whether they did so to gain a financial reward, to put a stop to what locally was referred to as sinful behavior, or because someone had it in for Shiner Joe, I will likely never know. When revenuers did arrive on scene, a gunfight ensued, causing Shiner Joe to lose an arm from the skirmish. What happened to him afterwards remains mostly a mystery, only that he passed away not long after his bloody encounter. But there were rumors. Rumors that Shiner Joe's spirit never left that shack. Well, Papa and his group were not about to let some silly ghost story bother them, so they decided to go check out this abandoned shack. After some time of walking, they finally came across it. Turns out, the Shiner shack was actually a 2-room cabin, although time and the weather had certainly done a number on the house. Anything that had been once part of a moonshine steal had been removed after Shiner Joe was arrested, but it had been used at some point after he left. From the looks of how much rusty and cobweb-covered junk there was, whoever had gotten the land after Joe's death had probably used it once as a storage shed. One room was fairly sparse, with an old stove and a few cabinets to constitute a kitchen living area. The other was a hoarder's dream come true. Wooden furniture, rusty box springs nearly stripped of their fabric, metal parts from old tools and worn-out tractor parts, and even a couple of old tires were tossed haphazardly around the room. Most of the stuff was broken and unusable. Probably stored there until the landowners stopped procrastinating and took it all to the dump. After a long time of digging through discarded junk to find something to tote the turtle home in, they were way too tired to drag themselves much further. So, they decided to settle in and spend the night. They made do by using some of the broken furniture as kindling, and managed to cook up a couple of the fish they had caught before settling themselves onto the floor for the night. Early the next morning, Papa woke to find a very strange sight. Over in the corner, shaking like a leaf, was Hugh. Now, Papa had known Hugh for a very long time, and knew he was not a man to get scared easily. Yet from the dim sunlight peeking through the dusty window, he could plainly see the look of utter horror on his friend's face, and a big stick gripped tightly in his hands. "Hugh, what? Shh!" Hugh cut Papa off before he could say more. Considering one of his best friends was looking like he had seen the devil himself, that didn't deter Papa any. Hugh waved over to him, so Papa scooted closer and whispered his question again. "Hugh, what's wrong, old boy?" Hugh was so shaken up that his reply was hardly coherent, but Papa did manage to catch part of it. "All night. It's been all night. We shouldn't have stayed here." "What's been all night?" "Shiner Joe," Hugh rasped out. "He's still here." My Papa just sort of gave Hugh an odd look. Was this tough-as-nails farmer boy really spooked by an old ghost story? What hogwash! He figured Hugh had probably had a nightmare, or heard the wind acting weird outside and got spooked by that. Oh, this was gonna be so much fun to poke fun at him over. Papa wasn't about to let Hugh live down being turned into a chicken over a little scary story. Just as he was about to wake up Dewey, he heard something that wiped the grin from his face. He yanked his head toward the door of the other room. Behind it, he had just heard a loud clamoring, as if someone were striking something hollow and metallic. Papa could hardly believe it, and wondered if maybe a raccoon had gotten in, but he didn't see how that would have been possible. That room had no windows, and only one entrance. If there had been anything as big as a raccoon in there the night before, it certainly would have been scared off by all of the noise the fellows had been making while rummaging through that mess. Maybe something just fell over, he thought. A moment later, it sounded again. More loud, metallic clanging. Papa turned back to Hugh. "You heard that too?" Papa whispered. "It's him. It's Shiner Joe. He's in there." At this point, Papa decided to wake the others. He carefully woke up his father and Dewey, ushering them to be quiet and to huddle over by Hugh so he could explain. Of course, Hugh's story was met with as much suspicion from the others as Papa had when he first heard it, if the grin on Dewey's face was anything to go by. My great-grandfather was a bit more sympathetic, thinking of the nightmare animal noises possibility. Suspicion fled from the scene the moment the noises started up again. This time, all four men were spooked. "An animal?" Dewey asked. "It's Shiner Joe," Hugh continued. "I know it's him. He's mad at us for staying here and breaking up his stuff." "No more damage than the revenuers did," Papa said, easing to his feet. "Ghost or no ghost, we need to get our catch." This perked everyone up. They couldn't just leave a whole cooler of fish and a turtle behind. No, they worked too hard yesterday to get what they did, and to leave it all behind would not only be a waste of food, but a blow to their pride once people found out why they left it behind. That cooler had cost a pretty penny, too, and there was no way they could go home without Papaw's mother noticing they didn't have it. Worse, if they said they lost it, she would probably come and comb the riverside looking for it. Papaw was debating who would actually come out better in a fight, a ghost or his mountain woman mama with her take-no-prisoners attitude, when his own father stood up. "You're right, son," he said softly, flinching as the sounds rang out again. "Somebody needs to go get our catch. Hugh?" Papaw looked down at Hugh. Poor fella, he thought. Hugh already looked like a scared rat, and he had probably been up all night, too. He would be surprised if Hugh could make it more than a few steps without collapsing. Thankfully, Hugh was relieved of his big stick, so he wouldn't have to be the first one to check it out. For a moment, Papaw was extremely grateful to his father. If something bad was in the other room, Hugh couldn't have handled it in his current state. All of the pride that welled up in his chest over having a father with such fortitude in the face of danger instantly dried up when the stick was shoved at his own chest. "Thanks for volunteering, son," his father said. Papaw loved his father, but in that moment, he wanted to strangle him for putting him on the spot like that. With Hugh and Dewey looking to him for leadership, he knew that if he chickened out then, he would be the one that would never live it down. So, mentally vowing to prank his father for that, Papaw grasped the big stick in his hand and walked toward the door, with his father, Dewey, and a very shaky Hugh following. Taking a deep breath and raising the stick high, Papaw threw open the door to reveal nothing. He could see nothing inside. The room was dark, true, but small enough that the light from the windows in the first room lit up enough to see. One by one, the others popped their heads over Papaw's shoulders, craning to see inside. Papaw scanned the room carefully, wondering if there really was something lurking behind one of the piles of debris. Papaw had thrown open the door with all of his strength, hoping to catch whatever it was off guard, and the boom of it slamming into the wall still rang in his ears. But that was fading fast, leaving an eerie silence behind in its wake. A silence only broken by the breath of his companions behind him. Slowly, he stepped into the room. Still nothing. He turned to his group, wondering if they were seeing anything he wasn't, when a thunderous banging and clattering rang out right behind him. Instantly, my great-grandfather and Dewey hopped backwards. Hugh, frozen in place by the noise he had been hearing all night, did not move, causing Dewey to trip over him and send both of them crashing to the floor. My great-grandfather only managed to stay upright by having raised several small trip hazards, children, and therefore had perfected some fancy footwork to keep himself upright. Papaw only barely registered the scene his companions were making behind him, because he had that stick gripped and ready to bring it down on the nearest attacker's head. Instead, he saw nothing. But he did notice where the noises were coming from. Carefully, he inched forward, his stick raised, and he started laughing. For you see, during their rummaging the night before, they had come across an old metal washtub, one as dinged up and rusty as the rest of the metal in that shack. They were so tired by that time that Dewey just put the turtle in the basin and left it there. The turtle, had spent all night trying to climb up the sides to escape, only to keep falling back in. Well, my friends, I do hope you enjoyed tonight's tale. As much as I love the paranormal, some things can be easily explained. Whether it's activity from nearby electrical fields, hallucinatory visions of shadow people brought about by high levels of radon or carbon monoxide, or even just a turtle. Remember that not every spooky story has a ghost at the end. Besides, solving a mystery is just as sweet as encountering the truly unexplained. Now, do your dear old Phantasmal Poppy a favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons. Remember to hit the notification bell too, to catch all my new stories whenever they come out. And if you want to be a real dear, please share this video with all your friends. Take care out there, and see you all real soon.